Sandra will announce the apologies.
Thank you. We have Councillor Darby and Deputy Mayor Simpson for lateness on council business. And Councillor Sayers is also on council business.
Any furthers? Okay, move the apologies. Me and somebody. Richard.
Sorry, I'm online as well.
Who is that? Councillor Leone, thank you very much for presence online. All those in favour, aye. Contrary, carried. Okay, that's that one there. Now, there's no public input section, there's no local board section, and there's no known extraordinary items. I'm going to ask Barry Potter to come to the thing. Sorry.
Item 2, just noting that I've declared an interest.
My humble apologies for that.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Councillor Ferry declared an interest.
Thank you, that's noted.
That's noted. Thank you very much for that. Okay. This is the recommendation that the information of the updated funding request and report is noted. It's up there. Barry, come to the table and talk to that.
Councillor
Move.
Stewart.
Do we need to have 11 of us around the table, or we've got?
No,
10 at the moment?
we have now got 11 of us anyhow by the late Councillor Walker.
We've
And,
got it now. Okay, thank you.
But online counts during the current. Okay. So we do have a quorum. It's been noticed, and we've got a physical quorum too now with the addition of Councillor Walker and Councillor Williamson. Barry Potter, please.
Thank you, Mayor Brown. Look, very briefly, this item is about the funding request that was received from City Rail Link Limited for an additional funding of just over 1 billion, 1.074 billion. That lifts the total project cost to 5.493 billion. And this is to be considered under confidential as we discuss this item, Mayor Brown.
Thanks for that. This will be short and sweet. I think we can't. I'm discouraging questions and debate at this stage because we're going to go into confidential to discuss the. It's highly commercial, and so I'm going to move and second that we receive Barry's note, Turner and me in favour.
Chair, is there any opportunity? I realise that it is going into confidential, but I do have one question in particular, Your Worship, for Barry. Is that okay?
Yeah. As long as it's not identifying any commercial issues.
So Barry, Morena, in regards to B, does that, in regards to the 6 decisions regarding an updated funding commitment, does that also include any further adjournment, any further discussions? Does that also, with B, include that as well? I mean, I know I'm not talking about any of the financial confidential issues on there. Does that B also include that?
In terms of that, the confidential in that section there relates to the commercial component of this, and also because this is an agreement through the agreements we have in place already with the Crown, that any announcements about the process around this or the decision making and the outcome are kept confidential and jointly announced together with the Crown, which is they're still considering it, so it's at a later date.
And just supplementary, Your Worship. So Barry, can you just confirm again when a decision is likely from central government in regards to their commitment?
My understanding is that they're considering it at the moment, and that it will be going to Cabinet shortly.
Okay, that's the clearest. Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship.
I think the best we know is that they're considering it at the next Cabinet meeting. Councillor Fletcher has something to say? Councillor
Oh,
Walker.
thank you, Your Worship. My question is to Barry Potter and doesn't relate to the commercial and confidential section of the agenda, but it relates to whether or not we have any knowledge yet on who's going to meet the operational costs of the CRL.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. The operating costs are still being worked through with the Crown in terms of where they sit. Of course, they will eventually fall between Auckland Transport and Kiwi Rail.
But that potentially is a matter for further discussion.
Yes, it hasn't been completed yet or resolved finally.
And also, for the optimisation of the CRL, what contribution will be required by the council in terms of the grade separation that will be required to enable the steady progress of the CRL?
So through the chair, the grade separation works happen after the completion of CRL, and they are included in the RLTP as to how that program works and how the funding around that will work. So there are opportunities there for discussion with the Crown around those matters.
Thank you very much, Mr. Potter.
Councillor Walker, please.
Sure. I've just got a question that goes to going into confidentiality around this. I would have thought it was in the public interest for those matters, particularly matters of principle that we might consider, to be covered off in public first. For example, my understanding is that the CRL is largely a Kiwi Rail project. And secondly, that the cost overruns are in large part due to COVID restrictions that were put in place by the government, and consequently the principle of accountability, responsibility and authority going to government contractually for those overruns. So they're just a couple of principles that I'd cover off now that I would hope we'd be able to cover off in public. So my question is, why can't we have a public discussion about those matters that are in the public interest?
Those are well-made points, and they're probably correct to go in the debate about whether or not we're going to confidentiality. At the moment, we're just receiving his advice, and then when we go to confidentiality, I think you should raise those again because they're valid points. I accept that. So at the moment, we have a mover and a seconder for that the information outlined in this report be received, and a confidential report, which we'll seek, is coming up, and the report is confidential. That report will be confidential and relating to the commercial negotiations. I think we'll put that, and then the next one is whether we go into confidential, and then you can raise that then, because it's quite a good point.
Sure. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I understand that the move to go into confidential is coming later. My request at this point is that officers give some thought to how we can separate out those elements of that report that could be public in advance. And my understanding is that we'll be doing that at the end of the agenda in respect of the confidential item. Thank you.
Yeah, I accept that. And even when we go into confidentiality, that can still be further discussed as to what is released post confidentiality is another opportunity for that debate. Is that all right? Councillor Lee, do you want to contribute?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A question to Mr. Potter. There is some confusion out there in regard to the completion date of this project and an apparent gap of unknown duration between that and the commencement of services. Most people would understand the completion date and completion time would be immediately before the commencement of services, and that's why it would be considered complete. But could you briefly just explain that?
Thank you, Councillor Lee, through the chair. In terms of, we talk about practical completion, that's a contract date and actually has specific definitions under a contract. And there are actually multiple contract practical completion dates on this. There's Link Alliance who have a completion date, but there are other contracts as well. So that's when the contract reaches a point at where various works have reached the opportunity for things to then happen. There are a number of things that have to happen after practical completion on this project. They include things like driver training, training drivers to operate underground. We have no drivers in New Zealand on public transport trains who operate underground. So there's a whole bunch of things that need to come through and be done, led by AT and KiwiRail primarily, before it can actually operate as a fully operating rail system. CRL actually becomes live.
It's a good question, though. There's wide misunderstanding. Even the Minister of Transport actually announced that he had a fixed price and a date of completion, but he didn't have either of those things. He had a fixed...
There are, of course, tunnels in the Auckland network and certainly in the Wellington network, and there are electronic means of training drivers, especially when we change over to EMUs, and one would hope that we can get that a lot more truncated and done more effectively than, you know, in a linear way, completed, and then we start training. That's not very smart, I don't think.
I think they do have mock-ups so that they can do training, and much the same as those people learn to fly an aeroplane without flying one, and that's going to run first, but they still have to actually have the actual thing.
That's correct, and it's not just driver training. There are other things that need to be done as well. There is how you manage crowds egressing from underground stations and underground tunnels in the event of an emergency. There's quite a few things that need to be worked through, and of course other issues with the wider network.
Mr. Potter, Britomart is an underground station.
Yes, and there are two other ones that are coming into play that haven't been operated through, of course, as well. Karanga Ahape and Te Waihorotu.
We live in the world of safety legislation, and it's considered there'll be 8 months between one and the other, okay? But good question, and not much I can do about that. I'm going to put the motion that's ahead of you. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary?
Aye.
Okay, we've carried your report, and thank you for that. There is now a move.
No extraordinary business.
Eh? There's no extraordinary business that I'm aware of, and I'm going to ask for a mover and a seconder to go into the confidentiality to consider the actual commercial aspects of the City Rail Link funding request. Have a mover and a seconder for that, please. I'll move it anyhow, and a second. And Walker,
So,
in favour.
I just
Now, would you
refer,
like, okay, now I'll accept a discussion on that. Thank you.
I just
Councillor Walker.
referenced my earlier comment around whether or not there are aspects of the report that could be considered in public before we go into confidential.
And the aspects you're relating to are COVID reasons and other issues. I think there are certain things that really we need to publicise about this, but it might well be best if we consider it, raise those during confidentiality and decide what it is that we can announce afterwards, because they get tangled up very closely. And if I discuss with you where I've got to, which is not all that clear either, we might consider that later on. So I would accept a motion later on for those issues that you wish to make a statement public about afterwards. But it's very hard to separate one reason or another when you're doing a negotiation, if that's okay. Thank you. Councillor Fletcher?
Oh, Your Worship, I know that you favour transparency in these matters because I recall you asking for more information on this prior to your election. But in this particular situation, will it be to the advantage of the Auckland Council or more so the government if there is some confidentiality around the robust discussion that must take place? Will it favour the council? Does it create a better environment for open discussion on that?
Well, in my view, I think I would like to confidentially advise where I've got to and receive the benefit of the wisdom of the 20 people around me as to what to do next. And then once we've got to a certain stage, then I think that openness is a very good thing to have. But right at the moment, as much in the same way as the sponsors gave some advice to the negotiators about how to get the best deal, we had to leave them in confidence with the mainly French contractors about how to go about that and have them report back, because otherwise if you can't negotiate large contracts in public when you want to raise a whole lot of things which can be awkward with everybody, but you play your cards as best you can.
I think that the only reassurance that constituents who have contacted me on this are seeking is that you're pushing back as hard for the most beneficial position for Auckland, and I think they're just wanting reassurance on that.
I can give you reassurance that I have been dealt the cards I've got, and I'm playing them as well as I can. And I'll try and explain where we're getting to that. We may be some time before we get to the end of this. Thank you. Councillor Filipaina.
Thank you, Your Worship. I look forward to your update on negotiations, but also wanted to clarify that if we do individually get contacted by media, it is our call in regards to what we say to them publicly. Just wanted to, in response to what we've just had. So thank you, Your Worship.
I accept that, but I think the rules are that bits and pieces that come to you under confidentiality have to be treated that way. But you can chat about anything up to so far that you know about.
I've been around long enough, Your Worship, as you have, to realise which what I can and cannot say to the media. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Filipaina. I put the motion about going to confidentiality. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary.
Aye.
Did anyone say contrary? No, carried. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to move into confidentiality, and that does mean that thank you for those public attendees who have quietly and carefully and with forcefulness clearly demonstrated your views, which are noted. I'm looking. So we thank you for that, but everybody, including you, has to leave at the moment, including press and others. So unless you're, but thank you very much for attending, and thank you for raising your concerns, and they have been noted. Thank you.